Welcome everyone. That's longer than I thought it would be. This is our final Community of Learners event of the semester. Thank you for coming. Many of you are here, I'm sure, because you know who is speaking. And what many of you already know if you had Dr. Patton in one class or 3 classes is that he is the living embodiment of passion, that he has a mind like no other I have ever experienced. He can be in character, he can pull scripture out of his mind, and he can pull sometimes jokes out of his mind too. So just ask him. He is also my neighbor, actual neighbor, not in the sort of Christianese kind of way. Though he is that too. And so I've enjoyed getting to know Dr. Patton in that way. He speaks for himself, so I'm going to let him continue to speak for himself. So here it is.
By the way, in my view, there's hardly, I don't think there's ever been a greater time for Spring Arbor in terms of productivity, scholastically, academically. Just the number of women and men who are publishing, producing. They love their students, of course, first. They love their work. Since the beginning of the summer, I have been involved in devotional reading. First, my dear friend, Robert who wrote Jogging with Chesterton. Highly recommended. I provide as a gift for some jogging friends. Illustrated by Professor Shaw. I just finished that about a month ago. And now I'm reading Nathan, the wonderful Foster's book, The Making of an Ordinary Saint. How delightful to have as part of your morning reading the works of brothers like Dan Money and David Foster and Robert Marshall. And the list goes on and on and on and on. This is in many ways glorious time for us to so benefited from it. So, hallelujah, the Lord is praised. This is a day that He's made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Oh, by the way, isn't that God smiling on us because it's blue sky in November? Let's never forget what our chaplain said years ago. Sometimes it's a matter of context. The Lord is good, and even when it's raining, He's smiling. The whole earth is full of His unfailing love. Either you've seen it and learning to see it, or you're not. All right. Characteristics of the trans-dance, cultivating sacred intentionality. There's nothing like 5 minutes before you go on to speak, realizing you got a long time. So isn't it a glorious time to live in this 21st century urban techno period where you can go up there nonchalantly, unplug it, go back, change the title, and no one notices, I hope. But actually, what I'm going to share with you is a book project that's this close to being finished with the first draft. And my brother in the work, Robert Woods, said, I've got a few more weeks, and he's been gracious. He said, look, I wanted to have it finished by August 1st, and you know what deadlines can be sometimes. Well, I've got a couple more weeks to finish the conclusion. But the book is titled Your Dance with Pop Culture, Who's Leading Who? And it's divided into 3 sections. Cultivating sacred intentionality, which is the first third of the book, which includes 5 characteristics of our dance with pop culture. And then it also is attempting to help the reader to cultivate sacred interiority and sacred identity. All 3 of those are a focus of the book, again titled Your Dance with Pop Culture. I'll start here. For all of you who talked about the integration of faith and life within the Christian community over the last generation, There sometimes seems to be little demonstration from myself and our community, including hundreds of students who have gone through my course called Introduction to Pop Culture, which I'm here to chapter 1. Hundreds of students who I assign different kinds of exercises to be aware of their own dance with pop culture. A lot of what I'm talking about is as a result of the 10 years of interviewing and papers and analysis from them. But for all the improved talk about integration of faith and life within the Christian community over the last generation, there was little, and there has been little demonstration to me of the hundreds of usually conscientious people in this community that they consciously consider the implications of the Lordship of Christ in their entertainment pursuits. That's my line. Is that this is probably the arena of our existence. I would call it the crucible of our existence. Is what do we do with our discretionary time? What does it mean to call Jesus Lord of the bored moment? And oftentimes what happens, I put up positively, that we suddenly become polytheists. We subject ourselves to a different Lord when we're bored or listless. And my offering, the thesis essentially is we need to be reintroducing ourselves to monotheism, that God informs everything, including our entertainment pursuits. If I can put it this way, what I'm pushing, the thesis is, when you have remote in hand, doing the channel surfing, or when you have Netflix in front of you with the 30,000 choices that you don't have to wait in the snail mail box for, what does it mean to call Jesus Lord today? That's basically what the book's about. Part of the problem is that our entertainment pursuits rarely lasted longer than the time it spent to push the power button for our smartphones, our laptops, our television remotes. That is, unless we can't find our remote. The arm's length availability of media programming in most settings, little more than seconds away, prevented most of us from cultivating the self-discovery that comes from the hard work of coexisting with boredom. We will. If I could pick one image that addresses the primary concerns of this lecture, one image, it would be the work-worried soul, television remote in hand, myopically channel surfing, averaging 3 seconds per broadcast option through the 150 premium package offerings, and finally settling on one that visually triggers a commitment for at least the next 3 minutes. And all of it without considering the implication of the Lordship of Christ, or more generally, asking about the moral point of it all. Let me say up front that this lecture is not about bashing mass media content simply as excessively violent and gratuitously erotic. Surprise, surprise. Sometimes it is. It's not this one. I'm not recommending complete isolation from pop culture if that was possible in the life of a monastic as the only solution to the mass media dominance of our imaginations. Though certainly it is one solution. Just ask Hans Berg. I don't want to waste your time in those areas. I seek to inspire and challenge you as believers to examine our lives in light of the Lordship of Christ in all areas of life, including your encounters as critics, creators, consumers of pop culture. I am trying to offer an argument of the nature of our techno-urban, image-dominated, word-resistant, amused to death, amazed to death, pop culture saturation. By the way, do you know that that's the follow-up to Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death? One of his disciples just wrote the book, Amazing Ourselves. Focusing especially in its mass-mediated forms, the lecture employs the metaphor of pop culture as unrelenting, always available dance partner. My main premise is that our dance with pop culture frames the crucible of our existence. and posits the question of moral and spiritual significance, who is leading whom in the dance. The lectures, we're hoping, and I probably won't get to this a lot of the time, that the book hopefully unfolds, is some strategic methods in cultivating a healthy balance with this dance partner. Central among them being the commitment to sacred intentionality. I'm hoping to entice you to consider biblically described meaningful dance where something wondrously, frighteningly significant is at stake at every step. I'll give you some autobiographic hints as to why I'm so passionate about this topic. Why something in my view, I think, is at stake. And it's been rethinking through what it means to call Jesus Lord of your bored moment, of your listless moment, of your angry moment, of any kind of emotionally agitated moment. The challenge started to become clear in my early 20s. After watching 2 NFL football games, none of them involving my favorite team, the Detroit Lions, I had just consumed 6 hours of my existence watching 4 football teams, countless commercials, scintillating replays, and endless banter christened color commentary. All right? 6 hours of my life consumed because I told myself I had nothing better to do. And I didn't. It was that same decade that Pink Floyd sang Comfortably Numb. Hopefully you get the picture. Afterward, in a heightened moment of self-disgust, I decided that I would find better things to do. I would find better things to do. That I wanted to move away from the what Cornell West describes as spectator passivity, incrementally dominating my life, dominate your life. So I stopped watching television for 2 years. Again, that was over 30 years ago. I think I threw it. It's just portable, not a big deal. In years later years as a pastor with a lifelong case of undiagnosed attention deficit disorder, still got it. I would regularly struggle finishing my sermon preparations because the game of the century just happened to be on. You ever been there? For years, any significant traction in ordering my private world was lost with television and radio programs that offered superior alternative enticements to the work sitting on my desk or the thoughts waiting to be stewarded in my head. After only a few years of cable, yes, the television fast lasted only 2 years. I realized that I could not afford the luxury of any 24-hour sports channel. They demanded near constant attention. There were always another score to inform me, another play to be deciphered, another victor to be heralded. I could understand the fixation with this mind-boggling saturation of sports scores and profiles if I aspired to be a sports talk broadcast analyst. But I was just one of millions of nothing else grabs my attention, imagination, challenged crusaders looking for victory in an area that was only vicariously mine. Looking for victory in an arena that was only vicariously mine. You can only watch for so long. The cycle of my addictive struggle with mass-mediated simulations and my torments over lack of resolve that build, in the words of Teresa of Avila, an interior castle, have probably dominated my life ever since. I find that a prominent theme in my journal surrounds this dance with pop culture. My journals for the last 30 years. As mentioned above, my favorite metaphor describing a wise engagement with mass media and pop culture is to understand it as a dance with the dance partners always desiring to get us on the dance floor. This dance is also perpetually ready and wanting to dance, this dance partner. Whether you are ready or not, whether it is appropriate or not, whether it is beneficial to dance or not, whether it is wise or not. Many people in the media-saturated culture know the dancing arrangement and opportunity to participate in the dance because of the easily accessible nature of most dances. As much mentioned above, many of the dances are as quickly accessible as any remote for the growing number of electronic entertainment devices that often dominate our living spaces. Yet it is not just a matter of easy accessibility, but also the dance partner's growing ability to sustain our interest, cultivate our commitment, and at times dominate our imaginations. We live in an exciting time, filled with opportunities and filled with special challenges. Dancing, surprise, surprise, is a gift of God, purposed ultimately to glorify Him. Our unique human capacity to rhythmically, intelligently, and emotively express what is often beyond words is a significant role of the dance. By the way, including our homecoming dance, which I can't wait to watch next year, and maybe dance. If it is true that the body is forbidden to dance, it will rebel. It is true that if the body is forbidden to dance, it will rebel. This is part of the wisdom of God's creative purposes. And this should have been clear even to the strictest of Christian traditions, even without the heavy-handed, sermonic, though entertaining tones of the musical film Footloose. By the way, the sermon of Footloose, where all is fun, is that dance as a forbidden commodity took on a messianic role and claimed the victory. Hallelujah. Alone or with a dance partner, a dance can uniquely express the ineffable and the glorious. This is the work of art. Dance is uniquely situated to express sometimes torridly. That's the scary part. Life's joys or sorrows and the intricacies of sabbatical comforts and passions. But the point is that Jesus must be Lord of the dance, including our homecoming dance. What does that mean? Of course, your participation in the dance, be it the latest laugh-riot television sitcom, your dance with pop culture, the movie all your friends want to see, or the latest video game with irresistible challenges, etc., can be a healthy experience or an unhealthy one. It can be anywhere on a continuum between wisdom and folly. As it fits your call to wise participation in all things, see Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15, the dance partner's ability to sustain your interest in the dance, cultivate your commitment to it, and dominate your imagination with it could be an instrument of blessing and refreshment, or it can be an energy-sucking, destructive curse. Wise participation depends upon the content and purpose of the dance and your needs at the time as a potential dance partner. Remember, the mediated dance partner is ready to take you to its dance floor 24/7. It seems, in pushing the metaphor further, that the wisdom necessary in choosing whether or not to dance at any particular time, should I watch it or not? Should I turn the channel or not? Should I turn it off and go visit a friend or not? Might include identifying what the dance partner in a particular dance is good for. In other words, how in either a specific or general sense, the engagement with the mass media offering might serve God. And remember, the psalmist said, Psalm 119, verse 89, 90 through 91, all things can serve God. This gets at the crux of much of the dilemma. The conscientious Christian rarely asks how the Lordship of Christ informs decisions about mass-mediated solutions to discretionary time and entertainment desires. No doubt we are going to dance. We are going to engage. The question is whether or not we will participate wisely with the right partners and right motives. A wisdom that includes a growing commitment to redeem the time given as a gift of God. And without such wisdom, the pop culture dance partner can also become more of a bully than a partner. Lousy dancing. I was raised in a Christian environment where dancing was frowned upon. The explanation typically was short and not very satisfying. Dancing stimulated the lust of the flesh. Of course, as human beings, there are lusts that can and should be stimulated. This is part of the reason that you exist. Someone, and many in your distant past and recent past, boom, said, I'm attracted. Your mom and dad, think about that. What a gift. And by the way, somebody, your ancestors in the 13th century experienced the same thing, and without it, you wouldn't exist. Every century of God's creation, every generation of God's generation, you and your house line was preserved because, shall we say, ideally within the context of covenantal marriage. Yet, like other graces of life that can be easily misunderstood and misused out of context, dancing can become merely an end in itself without framing wisdom and informative joys, further enriching the experience. This is what St. Augustine described as undivided affections or desires detached from our relationship to God. It is not just about the dance, but the human participants, the celebratory themes, the music that serves it, and the joys surrounding it. It's much more complex than letting your body move. My religious tradition, fundamentalist Baptist, that's the tradition which I'm ordained. I try to say Baptist, become Baptist. Something happens to you. Simply chose to exclude any form of dance as legitimate cultural expression. It is the same prohibition that set the scene for the movie and subsequent musical production, as mentioned earlier, Footloose. As noted above, when dance is prohibited, the body typically rebels. In grade school, I was excused from dance classes that took up a couple of weeks of physical education curriculum. In 5th grade, I was certainly too young to authentically own such prohibitions on dancing. Oh, Paula. 10 years old. But I appreciated the excuse for not having to participate in the highly vulnerable act of initiating requests for a dance partner. Thankfully escaping the potential humiliation of being turned down. So I sat out the ordeal. Hey, it was against my religion. Yeah, like I understood that as a 10-year-old. Then I got to high school in the late 1960s and attended a school dance for the first time. I went on my own and stayed on the sideline, and I watched, and I wished, and I could see what this was about. More about the dance. I'm still not very good. By the way, I will commend your generation because I see this music wedding receptions. So you better have in mind, and you seem to make it a collective celebration. It's not just about somebody demonstrating their capacity to attract sexual for all the compelling trust for it. I think you're getting better, not making it just about something. Expression. By the way, I would say about the dance before I move on. It's up to your generation. But I fully believe that it's your generation that's going to find out what it means to be able to dance. Informed by dominant themes other than let your body move you. We have bodies next to each other. What does it mean at your wedding reception to have people dancing to themes that are profoundly celebratory? Forgiveness of God. I've not seen the dance. I've not heard the music that helps us to dance to the forgiveness of God, to the reconciliation of God, to our chosenness of God, to our belonging in God. What does it mean to dance at our homecoming dance to those themes? That's up to your generation to figure out. Please help us. I want to talk about sacred intentionality and prefacing with this. C.S. Lewis said, every decision a person makes takes him toward or away from a relationship with the person who made him. The one relationship for which that person was created. If you don't find a quote all of this that's worthy of memorization. That is. It's part of your confessional time in the morning or whenever you find that time. You are making confessions, right? Every day of what you believe, your core beliefs. That's what we believe. If I was to choose a quote that would help you understand the importance of allowing even your bored moments to be informed by the Lordship of Jesus, that's the one. Because he's right. Every decision a person makes takes him toward or away from a relationship to the one who created him. The one relationship for which that person was created. Let that haunt you. Say it 10 times a day and be reminded that everything matters. You don't believe me? Just take that up with the writer of Ecclesiastes. Take it up with the apostles. Now, in fact, what I'm going to do, this in preface this, I want to talk about curiosity. Curiosity. Sacred curiosity. Before we talk about intentionality. I have gone to the Detroit Free Press online site for coverage on the professional football team's development of the day. After reading an article on the availability of starting defensive back for Sunday's game, an unrelated headline begged to grab my attention on the right side of the screen. You know what I'm talking about. Right? Is, and I'll just say, Paul Patton's dress too tight? I wanted to read about the football game and the defensive back. And there's this headline. Is Paula Patton's dress too tight? Now, part of me wanted to believe that the headline's question was a legitimate invitation to exercise an ever-discerning fashion sense and weigh in on the possibility of the screen silence provocateur's inappropriate fit. Right. Most of me knew that this was an obvious headline ploy to entice me to push the button and visually dive deeper into the evidence and allow myself to be the judge. It would only be a short and pleasurable dance, but of course it was another sexist stimulation exercise in the shallow end of the pool, a visual invitation trumping the comparative blandness of information about the Detroit Lions' past defense. Of course, the purpose of headlines, the sufficient beckoning to the newspaper reader of the early 19th century or to the web surfer of the 21st, is to grab sufficient attention so that the reader commits to reading the reportage and witnessing the photographs of the video footage. Come and dance, it beckons. But as the brilliant Methodist missionary E. Stanley Jones put it, and I will reinforce, brilliant, if you don't know E. Stanley Jones, you must get to know him. What did he say? What grabs your attention grabs you. And who's grabbing you? Certainly there are things that should grab us, shake us, and force us to turn our attention to important events, themes, and visuals. Yet often the headlines are merely quasi-voyeuristic invitations to distraction, alleviating boredom for 30 seconds, a half-minute diversionary settlingness, 30 seconds of settlingness. And of course that's 30 seconds you can't get back. We are wired to be curious, more intentional in stewarding our curiosities. Diversions, perhaps any diversion, like those headlines noted above, pleasurable or unsettling, and sometimes both, are often triggered by our curiosity. Of course, our ability to be curious about anything is a common grace of God. The church father Origen described curiosity and inquisitiveness essential to a passion for learning as a gift of God that can lead to helpful academic, artistic, and scientific discovery. What are you curious about? And like all gracious instruments that can be used and misused, curiosity can try to trigger movement toward the discovery of trivia or profundity, ascendant and glorious revelation, or debasing and gratuitous titillation. It's the same trigger, curiosity. Among other things, it was curiosity that edged the Edenic dwellers to the edge of the spiritual cliff, and it's curiosity that helped bring throngs to hear the teachings of the Savior. The gift of our curiosity will typically serve our desires, what we love to experience, whether they are desires and loves that are in keeping with the Lordship of Jesus or not. Thus, in praying for an undivided set of desires, loves, and longings that are contextualized by God's presence and His call to holiness and wisdom, Of course, such desires include entertainment longings and passions for novelty. Augustine was certainly on target, as was the psalmist, in praying for an undivided heart. What does that look like here at Spring Arbor? Especially when you are bored or listless or lonely or angry or looking for a fix. For the undivided heart, there is no desire, no longing or love, no aspiration or dream allowed free rein, except as informed by the guided freedom of the Lord. In his journey toward a more unified vision and experience of allegiance to God, Augustine lamented, "I have wandered from the one God has revealed for his purposes for humanity and searched for the fragmented many." Augustine describes many of our dance with emotion, our disregard of the Lordship of Jesus in our agitated states. Sacred intentionality. I often get distracted, so do you. I bet you I get distracted more than you. I'm an undiagnosed ADD guy. Sacred intentionality is an instrument of resolve toward experiencing a guided freedom, self-discipline, moderation, and joy in our dance. Sacred intentionality is the experience of purpose-filled traction toward who you are resolved to be in light of the biblical witness. I often get distracted, maybe so do you. So what? Well, it depends upon what you get distracted from. We are often telling ourselves in a variety of situations, don't be distracted. However, when it comes to the distractions that throw us off track from the intended journey of our existence, when we look over months, sometimes years, and ask, what is it we're trying to accomplish, we might find ourselves more externally distracted than intentionally directed. We often end up telling ourselves in a variety of situations, don't be distracted. However, when it comes to the distractions that throw us off track from the intended journey of our life, when we look over months, sometimes years, again, we find ourselves more externally distracted and intentionally directed. If distractions are not always destructive, we could probably say that they are at least diverting. And often we want to be diverted. It seems that we need to be diverted. Too often it seems our diversions and distractions lack intentionality. They are not consciously tied to the overarching vocation of the follower of Jesus Christ, that of loving service to God and to our neighbor. My notion is that for many of us, the largest area of our lives affected by a lack of intentionality, characterized by a scattered, fragmented, and random pursuit of novelty, is associated with our entertainment longings and dance with pop culture. Let me remind you that if you don't know what it is from which you are distracted, you can't call it a distraction. And that's a crisis for many people. The human capacity to be intentional, to deliberately choose one thing over another, one path over another, is what we call a common grace. That is a gift of God common to humanity. Intentionality is a gift of God, even in the midst of being surrounded by distractions, can inform and affect the overall direction of a person's life. It is, of course, a dominant element when choosing and pursuing career direction, or choosing to be faithful to a marriage partner, a friend, or a local church. But it is also a dominant element with a television remote in hand, flying through those 30 channels, the thousands of Netflix possibilities and YouTube choices. The remote control finally pauses its entertainment shopping survey of options because you paused it and you're settling in. What does it have to do with your faith? You have made the selection, maybe only for 10 minutes, but in those 10 minutes, all other entertainment options are unavailable. In an entertainment-saturated environment that dominates most living quarters, we are regularly making choices, expressing intention. It is a sacred use of intentionality when we tie it to the calling bestowed upon us by our Creator. We sometimes fail to see that our ability to conceptualize objectives, goals, is a gift of God. A objectives, goals, intentions, whatever we call them, serve to clarify the why of our behavior, including the why of our entertainment engagements. That intentions work in ways that provide answers to the largest whys of our existence. Why are we alive? Why pursue justice, mercy, and humiliation? Why allow this entertainment-soaked invitation to Sabbath? And the smallest whys, why choose this gesture of that column? The capacity to choose goals is not just a domain of humans, by the way. Since we readily observe animals choosing certain behaviors like objectives. My dog, sorry, next one. Yeah, he's that cute. My dog just barked at the door, demonstrating his intention to be let outside so he can make sure that there are no gleefully happily squirrels in the yard. However, my dog Easton is hard-pressed to identify intentions. Self-reflection is not his strong suit. Still, his actions, his barking at pedestrians audacious enough to walk in front of our house are neither random nor meaningless. Even ultimate intentions like survival are wired into his DNA, though as far as I know, he's not readily aware of the possibilities of non-existence. Still, in a simple sense, he does nothing mindlessly, and neither do we. The immediate application to the focus of the lecture is our engagement with popular culture's endless array of entertainment options. It has been a long day of work, a long athletic practice, or an arts rehearsal, a long drive, or you're about to turn in for the night or call it a day. You deserve or not a brief diversionary visit to some location other than your own. So we turn on a mass-mediated program. By the way, you should hear Thomas Merton's mocking of that term, program. So we turn in our mass-mediated program sometimes mindlessly. And whatever the circumstantial causes or emotional agitation, our selections are associated with the intentions, conscious or unconscious, significant or superfluous, legitimate or unseemly. In the book, I spend a lot of time talking about how the gift of God that drenches us is that we have opportunities to make choices, wise or foolish, to redeem the time or not, to think well or to think foolish. I've done it. Let me just move on. Let me talk about the 5 characteristics of your dance with pop culture. Now, by the way, I'd love to get you to argue. Okay? And you know where my office is. We don't always have to agree, but this is based upon, again, 10 years of discussions, of ethnographic interviews, of assignments turned in. First characteristic of our dance with pop culture. Suppose a food item, junk food as well as healthy, was as easily accessible as the push button of a laptop computer. Imagine that merely thinking about a cupcake, make that 2 cupcakes. In fact, make that 3. You're talking to a guy who's eaten a half gallon of ice cream in one sitting. I can be addicted to anything. Imagine that merely thinking about a cupcake, make that 2 cupcakes, creme brulee, or 2 stalks of cooked buttered asparagus for a few seconds. Settling in on your desire to wolf them down would make it immediately available. And imagine that it is the magic that is at your fingertips every day, all day. This is beyond our saunter to the refrigerator, opening the door, hoping to find some transcendent snack experience. You ever done that? You go back 20 minutes later, and nothing has changed. The magic does not even make everyone get off the couch for this. And then everyone is commanded to eat sensible portions. This is the challenge. Maintain a balanced diet and cut down on sugars and carbs. But just think about it for 3 seconds. There it is. What would we look like? And how resentful would we be towards the diet police? Now suppose any photo film scene, video sensation, gratuitously sensual, graphically violent, or aesthetically brilliant and redemptively haunting was as accessible as the push of a button. Imagine that merely thinking about it launched a series of searches that delivered the visual package in seconds. And then someone brings up the Savior who sagely offered this cryptic little gem. The lamp of the body is the eye. And whoever looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Thanks a lot. If such visual magic were possible, would the lamp of our body be full of light or full of darkness or somewhere stigmatized in the middle? And how easy would it be to conveniently marginalize the man of Galilee, which happens to be as far away as you can get from the entertainment anarchy loosed upon the earth? Again, you know the communication technologies that make this magic real. You want to have resentment towards the diocese? Maybe that explains some of our resentment towards the ecclesiastical groups. Now move on. The second characteristic of the trance dance is the tendency to underestimate the time devoted to mass media diversion. And again, I'm a media guy. I love it. I love stories. I'm a playwright. I'm an actor. I can be addicted to anything. Second characteristic of the trance dance is the tendency to underestimate the time spent devoted to mass media diversion. One program watched turns into 2 or 3. Ever been there? 5 minutes of web skimming on the second screen turns into 40 minutes of searching for the perfect link. I'm on a mission for the perfect link. First, underestimating the time trying to figure out what to watch. Surfing the internet, settling on sites unknown and unknown. Browsing the Netflix carousels, just for us. Channel skimming, remote in hand, wondering what else is on. Remember the Jerry Seinfeld great one. Then once we've decided to settle in for a minute or an hour or 3 hours of media consumption, we cannot help but underestimate that time either. It is typically our inner monologue that cannot quite fully justify the mediated excursion of free-falling with discretionary time through the wilderness of freedom without much focus. Through the wilderness of freedom without much focus. Often it is simply because we are not sure what we're looking for or tell ourselves this, but we'll know it when we see. It's like going to a grocery store without a shopping list. Third, gotta move. The dance partner has an exceptional ability to attract our attention. I'm fascinated by the description of Proverbs, observing that death and destruction are never satisfied, and neither are the eyes of men. What do you know? It seems that our profoundly accessible and just as profoundly varied entertainment options are a feast for the eyes unique to world history. I love being alive in the 20th century. This is a wonderful time to be an artist with unique challenges. Still, our contemporary setting also bursts at the seams with eyes not satisfied, having not seen enough scintillation or spectacle. By the way, for those of you that are thespians out there, understand, in my view, and I agree with David Mamet, that spectacle is the enemy of true theater. And the two-dimensional spectacle winning the competition for our visual and auditory attention for the next 3 seconds or 3 hours has, surprise, surprise, the ability to allure a trance-like focus faster and more repeated than anything else in world history. As mentioned in the preceding notes, we really do not see ourselves in the trance. That is one fairly standard characteristic of trances in general. Those in a trance don't know. Just watch a child engrossed in a program offering. The other day, we're hosting my 3 to 5-year-old grandsons. They're geniuses. I tried to get their attention while they were watching a movie. You ever tried to do that with a toddler? Something about an archaeologist and his grandson in Egypt looking for some lost artifact at Cleopatra. So that was good children's entertainment, man. I was struck by the intensity of their focus at the laptop screen. Zeroed in, there was little outside of the frame to compete for their attention. I wanted them to pause it for lunch, but they didn't hear me. However, I will not be surprised when they eventually tell a story of watching their grandpa similarly absorbed in the game on television and not hearing them as they asked to play ball with me in the backyard. The nerve. My children have called it my sports news trance, hearing them in a distant way, but not hearing them specifically and what they were saying. I would be too engrossed in the possibility of the next play being worthy of that evening's video offering of game highlights, which would also be worth watching again that night, and good enough, again the next morning. Spectator passivity. Next time you're at a restaurant that has decided to plaster walls with television monitors playing sports highlights and entertainment news galore, without the sound, think about it. What focus group decided that that's what people love at restaurants? Try placing yourself under the monitor so that you can see the number of times that programming interferes with conversation of those in booths and tables around you. Even with the sound muted, the flashing technical changes, camera angle changes, focus changes, any camera movement, draw our eyes to the screen like moths to the flame. Even when deeply immersed in conversation with a friend across the booth, our eyes, theirs and theirs, divert quickly to the screen every so often. Imagine being in conversation with Jeremiah or Amos in one of those eating establishments which floods us with visual stimulus. In their mid-sentence, you might excuse yourself to take a look at the pinch-hit home run or the crushing maneuver of the ultimate fighting match replayed over the prophet's shoulder. Sorry, Jeremiah, I gotta see who wins. Let's move on. 4 characteristics of the trance dance. Often our mass-mediated choices are automatically deemed superior in activity to worthiness to anything three-dimensionally accessible. By the way, let me just mention here too, part of these characteristics is that we are wired by God to be suckers for stories, especially great stories. And there are stories galore, some of them brilliant, some of them artistically memorable, some of them junk. But we're always suckers for stories. Why? Because we're made by a storytelling God who knows that's one of the ways that we keep our attention. It's part of the context of Sabbath. And by the way, because I'm running out of time, I want you to consider, and I have more time to spend in this book, but I want you to consider that your entertainment engagements are to be understood within the context of Sabbath refreshment, refinement, and rejuvenation. There is a function and purpose toward your most holy function. That when you have work and rest, and when you're weary, when you have work, you seek rest naturally. When you're weary, you seek refreshment. That's where the arts and entertainment can come in. We're wired that. But how do we make sure that we're being in our dance with pop culture instead of being dragged around? Fifth is the dominant default mode. When we experience emotional agitation, especially boredom, spend a lot of time on this book. We all have dominant default modes when we experience any emotional agitation. And what I invite you as listeners to this is to start taking seriously your journal and your journey. When you find yourself bored, what do? What's your default mode? What does it mean to call yourself a Christian in the midst of listlessness? Any kind of emotional agitation. These are the 5. Let me stop here because I know I'm about out of time. I wanted to see if there's any questions about your dance with pop culture being the crucible, in my view, of your spiritual existence. What are you doing with your discretionary time? What does it mean to call Jesus Lord when the board moment? Let me stop there for questions. Anyway. I'm hoping it's resonating. Give me a little vertical, if not, extra credit for you. Anyway. By the way, let me mention this to you. These are more significant issues for you when you go home than when you're here. Why? Because I find that mass-mediated engagement, especially when you're emotionally agitated, is much lower here on campus because your friends are 10 feet away. A variety of activities are so close. But when you go home, And then you also notice that your family that you love, many of you come from some wonderful families, but you're surprised at how much of the time is spent watching the programming. Yeah, say it.
Are you more concerned between the availability of mass media or the content of mass media?
That's a good question. I had to kind of rush over this. I think that the issue, and I hope this helps to explain my passion on this, are threefold. Right? One is availability, like never before in history. It's, your smartphone, the second screen, which is going to be doing more and more and more and more. In fact, for those of you in my mass media class, you heard Delonte say the other day, he finds when he knows where his phone is, he doesn't have to be bored for more than 2 seconds. It's just all it takes is to get it to your pocket, pull it out, boom. Right? So accessibility as never before. I mean, these are always questions that people have. What do we do with discretionary time? But Augustine had to walk 7 blocks. He had to walk 7 blocks to serve his Maximus. Well, these things haunted later, even long after his conversion. So first off, it's accessibility. It's a unique challenge. I mean, I like to put it this way. Guys, when we hear about the prohibition, you all hear about how terrible it was. You don't hear about how many people stopped drinking. Why? Because their alcohol, their drug of choice, wasn't easily accessible. That's all they ate. Right? It's the same. My brother, who doesn't mind my saying this, was a pornographic addict for 10 years. Right? Long before the internet, what could the therapist say to him? Okay, what I want you to do when you're tempted to go to get your fix, wear a Christian t-shirt. Jesus is my Savior, right? Plaster your car with Christian bumper stickers. That will sufficiently redemptively shame you when they're not doing that. Well, now everything is so accessible. No one's there. Okay? So accessibility is one thing. But I think that all things considered, how do we moderate through the process of making sure that we're aware of our cycles, our seasons, when we're bored, what do we do, what's our default mode, maybe we need to change it. And we're just learning more and more about the brain's elasticity. You can change, we can change. It's an exciting, fearfully, wonderfully modeling mind that we have, right? So accessibility is one thing. 2 is I think the industry is never been better at producing art. Even electronically mediated mass mediated offerings, never been better at telling stories. Some of it's junk, some of it's memorable art. Right? We have to be learning how to be discerning. So it's accessibility, it's the industry's never before ability to provide thousands of options of worthy and sometimes unworthy art and mass. And then the third is, I think it's just the human condition. Whether you're living during Plato's time, Augustine's time. Can I give you an example of this? John Chrysostom said this regarding our human propensity to look for distractions. He said, ask the Christians of today. And he was a leader in the church in the 4th and 5th century, died in 407 AD, 407 AD. He said, ask the Christians of today, and again, a millennium and a half ago, ask them today to talk about Amos or Obadiah, any of the apostles or prophets, and they suddenly stand mute. But we ask them to talk about their favorite horse and charioteer, they suddenly become solemn as a sophist already. Sounds like today. You just do a little bit of historic study about how people in past centuries dealt with discretionary time. It's always been a dilemma. As Nathan Foster's wonderful book says early on, quoting Albert Camus, the fact is that everybody's born. And as a result of that, people learn coexisting habits. Are they healthy or redemptive or not? So I'm concerned about all 3 areas. Accessibility, wondrous development in the growth and amount of art and junk. And then also our human propensity to find enough rope to hang ourselves. Either way, I'm convinced that this is the crucible of our existence. It's one of the reasons why you love to go on mission trips, where there's no electronic media. because it forces you to live with mission right there. And you don't have to deal with discretion every time. You want to choose arenas to engage in that you can have an effect on things.
When Dr. Patton says he wants to have this conversation with you, I think he means that.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to cut